This is a model that I made yesterday, and I thought it would be a good kickoff stream to show just how easy it is to train a Flux style LoRA. This is a model that I trained off of really bad artwork. Yeah, and try not to bait me too much. I might fall into it. But if you've ever been to a thrift store and walked around and seen some of the $5 art prints that are for sale and thought, who would buy those and who painted them, I might not have the answer to that, but now I've created a way for you to be able to make your own. So we're going to go through step by step how to gather the data for something like this, how to train it on Civitai, how to pick which one to put forward, how to prompt it, and then how to use it. I've already trained this and posted to the site because I don't think anybody really wants to sit here and watch me stream for 1 or 2 hours waiting for all the epochs to come through. But I could play some Slay the Spire or something and do that sometime. So the way I started this one was looking for really bad artwork. It turns out there's actually an entire museum dedicated to this. I forget which state it's in, but it's called the Museum of Bad Art. And these are a few of the pictures that I used to train this model. I only used 21 pictures. So a very good abstract. Some dogs dancing. I'm not even quite sure what that is. Some great looking people. Former president. That's a dog licking. Yeah, some of these might have been from Stable Diffusion 3. Another dog. That's a weasel, I suppose. And that's pretty much half the data set right there. They're high resolution enough. They're in different perspectives. So they can be a bit more vertical, a bit more horizontal. Flux doesn't really care too much about any of that. I suppose one of those, if you look the right way, could look like some nudity was there. Yeah, there's some great artwork. But as you can see from the examples I've just shown, these are the examples of the images generated using the LoRA I'm about to show you how to make. And they look pretty on par with that. They might look a little too nice, maybe. But you've got 4 fingers here. You've got all the smudge marks you could ever want. Fine detail going to the face here. Ultros is a little high quality, maybe, yeah. I'm going to go picture in picture so you can see this a little clearer. Yeah. Since Ali might be watching, that might be one he wants to see. Nice 6 toes there. And who knows what's going on with that foot. So these are some of the results from that. And you can see it definitely took the style. You could go a little further with this, but I thought this was a nice landing point for it. Like Walter White here with 4 fingers in one hand and cropping fingers there. So how do we get here? Well, if you're new to Civit and you've made an account and you have some buzz, maybe not this much, but if you go to the Create tab and go to Train a LoRA, you're presented with your choices here. You can either make a character, a style, or a concept. In this case, we're going to do a style. While I'm training this to do bad, paintings, you can use this technique for good art, or whatever you want. So we do Thrift Store Artist, Flux, version 2. Then click Next. In this case, use images that you have the rights to. And I'm just going to drag straight from that folder that I made of examples. And so it's loaded them all in, but you can see there's no tags, no captions, anything at this point. And if I go a little too fast anytime, do let me know. If there's questions in chat, I'll try to look over. But so we switch it over to caption mode because we're using Flux, so we don't need to do tags. And generally, I'll go to the auto label. I'll usually keep the temperature the same, but I'll bump up the max new tokens. Yeah, the trouble is there's nobody to argue with me, as Taschen Format mentions. Sometimes, I mean, like I'm hoping, and I will definitely do more streams with guests so that we can have a bit more contrasting opinions, but for now, it's me. And this works for me, and it should work for you. I'll bump up the max tokens a bit just to get a bit more detail in, but in this case, for this kind of style, probably doesn't matter too much. And we'll submit it, and we'll cross our fingers and hope the auto caption's working right now. There's always a chance it doesn't, and oh, there it goes. All right. We got lucky, first try. So it's going through, it's doing some auto labeling. So now you can see all the pictures have received a caption. You know, all of them kind of describe everything in detail here. First try every time. This was not edited, this was live. A new feature that has, I think it's been a few weeks now, but you can, if you really want to get into the details, you can click zoom in now and get a better perspective of the images done and full-size captions. But in this case, we're going to be lazy. We're going to do this the lazy KFT way. So, and this is going to be maybe the most surprising shock part of all this, so I'll take a sip. All you really need to do is copy a couple of these. So find the start of it. You know, this is a painting creating an expressionist style, depicting. We'll start with that. Usually I'll copy it into a text file, but I'll copy a few of these. You know, this is a vibrant impressionist painting in acrylic on canvas, depicting, and that's where I'll stop. And usually I'll pick 3 or 4 of these that sound good and just take it up to the point where it starts describing what's actually in the picture. Hey, Chrono. Hey, Pixel Pusher. Good to see you guys. Yep, we're creating LoRa's live. So I can't quite show, but I will show how I trained the last one and which captions I used for that. But for now, you know, I'll copy those to a text file and just save it for the next step. You know, we will say I have the rights to all these images and go next. This will create the package and get it ready for the trainer. So in this case, it's pointing out that we've got captioned images and SDXL works best with tags. That's because it's automatically picked SDXL. So we're creating a Flux LoRa, so we want to click Dev. So that's gone away now. So here, sample image prompts, that's where we use the text we had before. So like I said, I'll copy probably 3 different ones of this, you know, whether it be an expressionist style, whatever the other ones were, and then I'll type in something afterwards that, you know, it'll either be Bowser and Princess Peach kissing, or Xenomorph eating pizza. Generally, you want to make things that you'd know what it looks like. So, you know, it could be Shrek eating onions, could be a cat doing something. Like I used to use in most of my pony and illustrious models, you know, the cat aiming a gun. And that, as it goes through the epochs or epochs, I'm not sure what the debate is on that one, but I usually call them epochs. And that'll give you a chance to see, what they look like on every step. So the only thing we're going to change here in the training parameters is I'll usually turn up the epochs, usually something to like 25. I'll use one much slower, but you might as well go further through the steps than default in case you do need something a little further. Usually I'll turn up the network dim by 1 or 2. If it's a style, it's not going to matter too much, but if you keep it lower, you might need a higher epoch in the end. In styles, you can flip augmentation. I don't know what the max is. Yeah, it looks like we can't quite do, that's not going to work. We can't do 9 billion steps. But something like 25 should work. Yeah, I can just blow all my buzz on one training right here, right now. But like I said, flip augmentation, if you're doing a style, can usually be all right too. I wouldn't use this if you're training a character unless they're completely symmetrical, because this will train, do a step through training and then flip the image backwards. So if something is meant to be right-handed, left-handed, something like that, you'll run into problems. But in this case, we're dealing with screwed up art anyways. So this can help train it even more, consistently to the style. So I'm not going to hit submit at this point because it's already trained. We'll go all the way back here, but I'll show you the results. So after it's gone through training, which usually takes around an hour, you'll get some steps like this. Yeah, and my hope is for this stream to show you it doesn't take that much to get something good out of Flux. As I know, if Schmid's here, he's the one who's told me he spends a lot of time making sure the captioning and everything's perfect. I'm calling him out right now, and hopefully he's watching this and, face palming to realize it could be really easy. So in this case, I did use 3 different captions to start off. A vibrant, expressive painting on canvas depicting a scene, a vibrant, expressive painting of Shrek, with a realistic yet stylized depiction, and a surreal abstract style. And this is the first epic. You can see it's already started to take on some of the look of it, but by the 3rd one, it's absolutely, starting to see that terrible style. And each one from here on up starts looking a little bit more like what we're looking for. By 9, 11, 13, this is the one I actually ended up going with, because at strength 1, which is what these are showing, this is, how it looks in low resolution. And that, to me, looking through the epochs myself, I thought this is the one that represents what I want to make. But if you keep going on, it still looks good. And in this case, looking good is looking bad. But, 15 would probably be good too. 17 is looking a little more abstract. The alien doesn't look so much like an alien. A lot more spirals are showing up. Shrek is looking quite handsome. And then it gets a little more messy from here on up. 21, could be a kindergartner graphic. 23, who knows what's going on now? We're getting a pizza party going on. Shrek's got company. 25 seem to have recovered a little bit, but still not the results we'd want. But in this case, maybe. If you wanted a really abstract one, go with that higher one. And so this model is the result of that training, using that prompt there of the image is a vibrant, expressive painting on canvas depicting subject. And each of these was prompted that way with this model at 1 strength. I did it all locally. So that's why it's showing Flux 1 dev hyper NF4 instead of just regular Flux. But all these images look kind of like ones you'd find at a thrift store or garbage bin or your grandma's house. So what you do after picking out the one you want to go with, like say we want to go with Epic 13 here, you can download it. That's what you'd start off with if you want to test it locally. And then that's how I do it. Download, try it locally, see how it looks, try the ones up and above it and below it. And then once you realize or pick out which one you want to go with, you can just click continue. And that brings you through the steps of picking up, which prompts you want to use, how you want to describe the model itself. And this is the screen for that. It'll ask you, which version you want to put up. If there's, this is the wrong one. This is version control. Edit model. So this is a style it was trained as. You add in some tags. In this case, I don't know if tags are fixed yet. It doesn't seem to find them, but it works. So I've got artwork, painting, canvas, crappy art, amateur art, thrift store. Nothing offensive in tags. They might get taken down. And, I can probably take this part out now because we're live. And then you get the description part. In which case, some people don't put any descriptions. I like to put something. I actually often have Claude 3.7 help draft these up. And, the way it's written, the first model trained exclusively to generate paintings that make you say, someone's grandmother paid actual money for this. Specializes in transforming any concept into inexplicably haunting imagery featuring anatomically questionable wildlife, suspiciously large-eyed children, or seascapes where the waves appear to be defying not just physics, but the very concept of water itself. Each creation comes complete with poorly executed perspective. At least one element that appears to have been added as an afterthought. Is that a bird or just a smudge? And that special quality that makes you wonder if the artist has ever actually seen. Oh, well, that's not good, Claude. They're painting. Yeah, from what I've heard, it is a removable offense to not include a description, but I've seen a lot of models that have, maybe gibberish text as a description. Yeah, there. And what I also like to include is kind of a range of strength for it. So in this case, I found it works really well between 0.8 and 1.0 strength. Usually when you post a model, you want to aim at that 1.0 because if people are remixing a picture or, hitting create, they don't often want to change the strength or often they don't know how to. It's pretty easy on the site, but many don't. And then prompting, this is the prompt I found worked the best for creating that style. And that's all you need. You can add whatever text after this and it'll put in that style. I've got a showcase collection for all my Flux styles. If you want to use it on the site, you want to sell generated images, which allows it to be used on Civitai generation service. And other best practice on this is, under details, there's version details as well. And as you go through creating the model, this will bring, it'll bring you through this as part of the process too. You want to make sure it is the right base model, but that'll be automatic if you trained it and it's coming in through from the trainer. You can put version changes or notes, often useful if you've done something like merging models or, this is version 2, what's new? You can add trigger words. Some models don't have them, but even with captions, I like to put something in here saying the image is a vibrant, expressive painting on canvas depicting subject. This is automatic if you bring it from the trainer, and I've set the recommended strength to 0.9. From there, you've got your model. You can see what other people have made already. There's some good examples. Quite a fan of the Cinderella here. Well, that's a great Sonic. Is there any benefit to not having a trigger word? I mean that's tough to say. Depends on what type of model. You know, I've made styles that you didn't need that, but I usually like to include them at least as kind of a reinforcement piece. Like I couldn't say that it is best practice, but I consider it my own best practice. I've noticed that a few users will look into the version details. Oh, I can actually do this, right? Does this show up? Yeah, okay. I noticed that a few users will look into the version details since you have to click and expand it. So I generally add version details in the main description. Yeah, it's good to do. If even, I don't often do it with the first version. I will do it with the second one if I've changed something, but it is good practice to do that. My first Flux LoRA was without a trigger and it was unruly. That can happen too. Sometimes if you pick an epoch that's far enough down the line, like if I went with 25, you might not need a prompt to help that out. And it does help, to have, especially if you're posting a model, to make sure that the ones yeah, that's okay. If I'm just looking at the screen, not the camera, as long as you can still see me, kind of. But another best practice I would say for posting a model on the site is make sure the pictures that are going in your first gallery here, your feature gallery, make sure that they have captions. Because a lot of the time, myself included, I'm lazy. I might look at a picture and say, remix. And, instead of saying this, I just want to say this is going to be depicting a scene of a cat and a dog dancing together. And I'll set the seed to random. Yeah, I can also remove that. This comes default from Forge, which I was generating locally with. Best practice would probably be remove this piece from your model before posting it. I didn't do that. Shame on me. Yeah, Comfy UI, that's where the struggle area is. I know there's extensions for Comfy UI that can add in Civitai tagging. I do use Comfy. I just don't use it for Flux right now. For my regular Flux models, no, but I use Comfy for a lot of other stuff. But like I can see with LambME's posts that the tags didn't come through. Some people delete them, and some people, Comfy UI might not bring them through. Now this one, which uses Flux, Thrift Store Artist, and Thanos, does bring it through. I am saving these as PNG, but that's kind of what Forge defaults as. If you're saving images out of Civit, they will come out as JPEGs. Or say for this one, yep, it's got the whole prompt here. Yeah. Florence is also a really good tool for captioning, like if you want to do kind of an image to image. There it is. That's my first 69. So here, I went and remixed that one, left in this part, which, this doesn't actually care too much. But now it's a scene of a cat and a dog dancing together. This, that's what you might find somewhere. This one's even signed by Stamoogle. Very whimsical. These ones, I mean, not much difference from taking off that text. Yeah, we blended in together here. But that shows, I've made a lot of LoRa's, tons with Flux, and it's easy to kind of overanalyze before all this, before you get into it, to think, okay, how many pictures do I need? How strong of a style do I need to make? And really, you don't need much. I'll show you a different model that I made the other day. That kind of concludes the tutorial part, still reading questions and everything, but now it's kind of more the discussion if you have questions, etc. But this is a series of artwork, based off a series of artwork where there's only, I believe, 6 art prints total. But I have 2 of them on my walls, and I've always liked them, and I want to make more. So this is trained off, I believe, 6 images. This one, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 2 of them, well, are pretty similar. And so this is only trained off that many images. But the results are still good. It took more epochs to get there. But, this one, you only, I found the good prompt for it. Oh, I left in a bracket here, didn't break it. But this one's a lion. This one's an eagle. This one, I'd have to check. 28 epochs, 1428 steps. Yeah, but I'll have to check which one I actually used. A clown. But you can see, even at only using 6 images or so, it did keep that same style. Shrek even, yeah. I could probably prompt a bit more of a style there. Pink Panther. This one obviously just kind of copied itself. Sonic. Kind of a messed up Pikachu. But it's quite easy to do something that works in Flux with only a few pictures. And pretty basic captioning.